Hello, everybody. It's James here, story time with Dutch. And before we go to the main body of the podcast, we're going to do some plugs. And let's see what plugs we've got here today. The World According to Dutch, available on Amazon. We've got...
Great book.
We've got Tales from a Dirt Road on Amazon.
Better book.
We've got, now, I know you're not going to say better book, but they're still good books, ladies and gentlemen, or gentlemen. Owen, Hart, King of Pranks, and Dwayne, The Rock Johnson, the People's Champion, also available from Amazon as well if you're inclined to buy a book and support us at the show. And also, if you want to support us further, go on iTunes, do us a 5-star review. If you're feeling that way inclined as well, nothing less than 5 stars, please. Keep it to yourself if you don't like the show. And anything else we need to plug there, Dutch?
So I could actually go on iTunes and rate us myself.
Only 5 stars, though, please.
Oh, I would never do anything less than that. I would go 6 stars if it's available, but I'm not Dave Meltzer, and this podcast does not originate from Tokyo, Japan, so I can't give anything over 5 stars if it's not under those conditions. No. So,
and neither of us are Kenny Omega or the Young Bucks.
You know, Dave Meltzer blocked me one time on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he can dish it, but he can't take it. So, and to say that me and Dave Meltzer are on good terms, I mean, I'm on good terms with him. He's not on good terms with me. Because he said something stupid one time, and I tried to debate him logically, and he went, click, I'm not going to do it. And I don't blame him because he was wrong, so he just cut it off. What little wussy.
Yeah, what exactly was it, do you remember, that you said or that you challenged him on?
Okay, I spent a lot of my career in Memphis. And he came on one day and he said, that's not even considered wrestlers by this guy or that guy. He's talked about Luthez or somebody. And I did well there. And I says, why did Mid-South sell out more times than Madison Square Garden one year? I mean, and it did ratings it did a primetime rating on Saturday mornings. So everybody knew who the wrestlers were. Now, people don't watch something because they don't like it. They don't buy a ticket if they don't want to see it. And they don't cheer unless they want to do that. It takes energy. But yet he was just repeating what he had heard and thought he was like in the know, but he was the farthest thing from it. Now, Tennessee at one time had 3 different territories. They had one in Memphis, one in Nashville, one in Knoxville. And the only one that was really had a bad rep was the one in Nashville. And that was run by a guy named Newt Goulas, and his son, I think you've heard us talk about him before, was the worst wrestler ever in the world that God ever created, was George Goulas, and probably Greg Gagne too. But what these guys were saying is Nick Goulas didn't pay, which was true. He was notoriously stingy, and you'd have to get on his ass and not cuss him out, but raise hell, and then he'd pay you more. But you shouldn't have to do that. But he was talking about, but when I engaged, let me go back. When I engaged Meltzer, he cut off conversation. And I'm still blocked today, which I consider that a badge of honor now. So I take a picture of it. Sometimes I post it on my social media. I put it on Facebook, which is under Dutch Mantell. Facebook, and Twitter, Dirty D Mantell. I post it on there. That's my main social media outlets. So that's where me and Meltzer fell out.
Just briefly, you emailed me not too long ago, and you wanted to also bring up, as you did just then, but maybe elaborate on it, that the Mid-South Coliseum sold more tickets than Madison Square Garden in 1982.
Yes. Well, somebody told me that, and I said, you got to be bullshitting me. I mean, Madison Square Garden, 21,000 seats, and Memphis had 11,000 at the most. But in 1982, and this has been substantiated, it sold more tickets in 1982 than Madison Square Garden did. And, the New York metropolitan area is like 10 million people. Memphis metropolitan area is like maybe 500,000. So a big difference in the drawing audience. But Memphis they sold more tickets in 1982. Now, that's going back a long way. But even any venue selling more tickets than the number one arena in the world is somewhat of a talking point, I would think. Mm. But I think Madison Square Garden only ran 10 times that year. I think something like that. Maybe 8 times. But Mid-South ran 52 weeks. So that is probably the disparity in it. But Memphis 1982 was a hot territory. We would fall out in Memphis on Monday nights, be 10,000, 11,000, and it sells out at 11,007, I think. That's for standing room only. That's when the fire department makes them shut it down. And Madison Square Garden has a capacity of 21,000. So, but I was at Madison Square Garden once when I worked there years ago. They had 5,000 people in that building. They lost money. They had to. 5,000 people in that arena looks empty. You know, there's an old saying, you could shoot off a shotgun in the place and not hit anybody. That's how scattered they were.
This is mid-90s, I'm presuming, is it?
Mid-90s when I was there the last time. Not the last time, but time before.
This was the
it was
Uncle
a time
Zebekiah.
before yes, it was a time I was there before the last time I was. And you say, what the hell are you talking about? No, I was Uncle Zebekiah then. And I came back this time with a little more of a character, Zeb Colter. And people still remember, some of them people still remember Uncle Zeb, but I didn't really do anything there because I had 2 guys, the Blue Brothers, Jacob and Eli, but they never really figured them in much. I mean, they were big, strong, the Harris boys, Ron and Don, twins. So, but I think people still remember us from there, and a lot of people really remember Zeb Colter.
Mm. They were still chanting "We the People" at AEW a couple of weeks ago, weren't they?
Yeah, they were, because they still remember that. I don't think they much liked it, but you can't do anything about it because they had Jack Swagger, or Jake Hager now, and Claudio, which was Cesaro back then. They went head up in that battle royal, that 2-ring battle royal they had, and they faced off, and the people looked at it, and the last they remembered it was "We the People." So they started that chant, which I'm kind of glad they did because it's kind of validating that they still remembered it. And I still have really great memories of those 2 guys. And I said maybe last week or 2 weeks ago on this very same podcast here that I think they missed the boat on those guys big time because they were big, strong. They had me as the mouthpiece, but they didn't go with it. Hence, now we're getting into territory now because that was Vince's idea. And whatever Vince thought was the way it was going to go. Mm-hmm. And because he could hear an idea could be the greatest idea in the world. But if he was in a bad mood or he just didn't like it for some reason, he just said no. And he didn't want it brought up again. So whoever brought it up to him, if they knew what they were doing, they would not bring that up to him again, unless it was something like Cena or Taker or some of the big guns. They would never bring it up again. So booking in WWE, and I've said this before, booking in WWE is like booking for an audience of 1. And I think a lot of people have, I think I actually started that saying, and then it kind of caught on, the audience of 1. You just got to please 1 guy. It could be terrible. It could be horrible. But the audience of 1, if he liked it, he'd go with it.
Now, this is probably a pretty terrible segue. So, pleasing an audience of 1, apparently on Sportskeeda you made comments about Sting recently that displeased many. Can you explain what you were replying to, what you said, and sort of clarifying everything?
Oh, please, people, lighten up a little bit. This is what I said. And some people actually validated what I said because I heard it from them. Scott Hall told me one day, now he's passed on, God bless him, but Scott was in, yo, man, He told me that Sting could not tell you how he got over. He got over, but through no mental effort of his own. They just told him what to do. He went out and he did it, and he got over. Well, when I said that, and I may have said it wrong, I may have said that he has no idea how he got over. Well, he does have an idea, but he could not recreate the idea. I'm saying initially, he would never, I don't think he would have that idea. But when and Ric Flair, we're going to talk about Flair in a little bit too, but Ric Flair was one of the main reasons Sting got over, because Flair carried him for almost a year and a half, back and forth. And if you're in the ring with a general like Flair and all the heat Flair had, and you were beating him sometimes and holding your own, well, of course you're going to get over. Sting was a big, jacked up guy, and he looked good. And he just did what Flair told him to do. That's all he did. And he may have come up with a few things later on that he'd like to do. Eventually, when people pop on certain things, well, you tend to go back to it. But it was Flair carrying that whole match. And I may have told this story before, because Flair also drew a ton of money. Now, this was mid-Atlantic, the Carolinas and Virginia. Mid-Atlantic, Flair also had a series of matches with Sting, we just talked about, and with Lex Luger. And they did tremendous business. Remember what I told you about coming up with these ideas? Mm-hmm. The brain trust there says, wow, man, if Flair drew all that money with Sting, and then he drew all that money with Luger, oh yeah, well, I'm getting it. Swanee is coming to me. Why not we book Sting versus Luger? It'll be gigantic. And they did that. Guess what happened? Crickets. Crickets. And the matches they sucked. Which is, if you're ever trying to book any kind of a show, don't ever book a top babyface versus a top babyface unless you got plans to turn one of them. Because who are they going to cheer for? Well, you're going to split your audience, and no matter who wins, you're going to piss the other half off that loses. But see, I guess people tried to tell them that, but they didn't see it, and they booked it. And the next thing you know, it was Flair being injected into that feud, and he got a partner. I think it was Arn. Then they did a round with Sting and Luger versus Arn and Flair. So
it's
but they got mad because I think they said that he didn't have, and I did say that. I'm saying that he didn't have the mental acuity in wrestling booking to put that together. And that's why you have a ring general and you have a ring follower. And I've seen some guys that are followers are really great, but they will usually go with the guy that's been there before. And Flair was a general. See, your heel dictates the pace of the match, the heat in the match. It's without a heel, guess what? You might as well close the door, because you're not going to sell any tickets. And that's why good heels made good money. And that's why they moved around more, because after a year's time in one territory, they get old unless they're turned babyface. And even turning babyface, they'll still have to leave in about 3 years, because, the fans, if they just keep seeing the same people over and over, they'll eventually stop buying tickets and coming because it's boring to them.
Mm-hmm. With Sting, it's funny that you mentioned Scott Hall, because Scott Hall, I believe, is credited with coming up with the Crow Sting character. But also, I've heard in interviews with Ric Flair, probably other people as well, where they've said that when they were wrestling Sting, maybe even Barry Windham said this, is that they had to tell him when to turn to the crowd and go, oh, do the howl. I'm not doing it, but do the howl for the crowd. He didn't know how to do the Sting gimmick as well as people who he was in the ring with.
Right. That's all I'm saying. is if he needs to. Well, I think he probably learned it later on after they told him. I mean, how could you not learn it? But I believe that they have to tell him to do this and have to tell him to do everything. But see, in telling him to do everything, that's the heel's job because they were both making money off this. So, and Sting, to his credit, he appreciated it. He did. And he knew he did, but he knew he didn't know anything, to his credit. So he never tried to go out there and do anything stupid or anything out of character, because if he did, he'd get back to the dressing room, or he may get it in the ring like, what the F are you doing? Stop, whatever it is. Or they just take over on him and, get some heat on him and tell him in the process of that. But he didn't know to do a lot of things. He's not a wrestling guy, really. I don't even think he was a wrestling fan. I think he was the Warrior. I don't think they were either. They got in this gym training, and a guy saw them, and he's a wrestling trainer, and he said, "What about wrestling?" And I don't think they were really eager to get into it, but once they got into it, they still didn't know anything. That's where I met them in Memphis. They showed up in Memphis one time as the Freedom Fighters. I thought it was one of the shittiest names I'd ever heard in my life. And they knew nothing. They couldn't be heels because they didn't know what they were doing. They couldn't be baby faces because heels couldn't tell them what to do because they didn't. After you tell them, they still didn't know what to do. I said, guys, why don't we? I changed their names to, I forgot what I changed their name to. Yeah, because the movie was out or had been out 2 years earlier, and they needed a gimmick. They kind of took that name, and it didn't get them over, but they at least took the name. But that's where I met them, and they were horrible. They were terrible, and they weren't there long. They was only they weren't in Memphis long, maybe 2 months, maybe. That was a territory wasn't doing that good. Bringing in green talent doesn't help either. They were part of the problem, so we had to move them. So we moved, I think, Sting to maybe
Bill Watts.
Atlanta.
I think Sting went to Mid-South, and Ultimate Warrior went to Dallas.
That's right. And they both got over there. Because I think in Bill Watts' territory, Eddie Gilbert was the booker. And we need to talk about him one day because he was a great character. He's dead now. But he liked him, took him under his wing, taught him a lot, but he didn't teach him how to lead a match. But they took him as a project and got him over. And when Warrior went to Texas, I don't know who the booker was then, they took him as a kind of a project because getting guys with that great body and the blonde hair with Sting, they were aesthetically pleasing on TV, and they got him over there. So it's funny they went together to Memphis and then split, and then found success in every other place they went.
We will move on, and we're going to go to somebody who we mentioned before. We said we were going to talk about it, and this must be a first. Both you and I have both watched a match that we can talk about, instead of one of us just describing it to the other and nodding, which is generally you've watched it and I nod. Ric Flair's last match, and I'll ask you for your opinions in a second, but the general consensus is that the people watching at home on pay-per-view or however generally disliked it as it was incredibly depressing, but people in the audience were quite positive about it because there was a great atmosphere in the arena. So it's amazing how the disparity between the two experiences for the exact same match of just how you consumed it basically.
Well, the people watching it live, they were invigorated by the other fans. If you hear a bunch of people cheering, well, if you were depressed by it, you'd kind of put it aside because these other people were so energetic about it. But at home, if you're watching it, you're going, and I don't know what people expected out of Ric Flair in this final match. I don't think any of them expected Ric Flair 1985 walking out in Greensboro Coliseum with 20,000 people sitting there. I don't think anybody expected Ric Flair, even in his early WWF days, because those days were way gone. See, I don't know what they expected. To me, in watching the match, I think that Flair tried to do too much of it on his own. And he looked, see, I was just hearing things about it. That, oh, it was great. It was this, it was that, and the other. But it wasn't great. And even before it happened, I had reservations about it. First of all, it's about his health. What if he has a heart attack? That would really be Ric Flair's last match. And that'd be a downer, not only for the family and Rick himself, but to the fans who wanted to wish him farewell in his retirement. But even watching him coming down the ramp, he looked so fragile. I mean, he looked delicate. Now I'm thinking, man, now I'm fearing for what's going to happen in the ring. And what I'm fearing is he may not die or he may not get killed, but he could get hurt, not able to get up. And basically the match that I saw, I think Rick tried to take control of it. And I understand that because he's taken control of all his other matches he's ever had. See, he's trying to deny that he's 73 years old. And very few wrestlers have wrestled that long, except there is one guy in Alabama who's done it. You know who I'm talking about? You probably never heard of Mike Jackson.
Yeah, he was a jobber, wasn't he, in the NWA in the late 80s, I think.
Yeah, probably. But he still wrestles and he still moves great. He weighs about 170 pounds. He's not a big guy. He never was a big guy. Him being 73, I don't know how he moves that way, but he does. But anyway, back to Rick. And there were some spots in there or some areas where I'm thinking, this is because people do not want to remember Flair seeing him like that, if it's only for 5 seconds. But see, I think they think that wrestling can create miracles. And I think if that had been laid out differently, I think it'd be a lot better. But in looking at it, who do you think laid that match out?
Ooh, I would have said Rick probably laid down.
Absolutely. Rick laid it out. And Jeff Jarrett said, okay, we'll do that. And the other kid said, okay, fine. And what's the other guy's name? What's his name?
There's Andrade and Jay Lethal.
Andrade. I want to say Adobe Andrade. and they let him lay it out because it was his match. But I think he wanted, and that's why I say it's a vanity project. He wanted to go out there and prove what he could do, but I don't even think he even knew what he could do. But as we found out, not much. So I wish him luck. Now, the next question is, when's his next last match going to pop up?
Yeah, there must be a commission out there that would stop him after that performance, surely.
The commissions aren't in effect anymore.
Well, I suppose it depends on the state, doesn't it? But I suppose mostly,
it does. It does depend on the state, but the state they're tax hungry too. You know, if he sells out, they get a bunch of tax money. But the next person that comes up, maybe with some money, and say, "Here, I guarantee you this," he's going to take it. Mm-hmm. I hope not, because you got to remember the Eagles announced their final tour in 2002, and they played a concert in London last week. So, but after a while, people caught on to that, and they said, we don't care. We'll go to it anyway. But with Flair, I don't know how long he can go with this, but I'm saying I think there will be at least one more, maybe two.
With funny you mentioned the Eagles. I saw them in 2019. Even the lack of Glenn Fry didn't stop him from touring again. They just got his son drafted in instead. In fact, I'm going to mention more on the match. In fact, a few notes. Mike Chioda was the referee. Nice to see him. I've interviewed him. He was a very nice guy. Doug Dillinger was doing security once again. Tony Schiavone and David Crockett were on commentary. And as for my opinion, for what it's worth, it started badly the second he came out because he looked like a very unsteady old man. And you know, a few months earlier, they were doing these training videos, and he looked closer to when he did the Shawn Michaels retirement match then, just a few months ago, than he did for his last match. He just seemed like a completely different person. I know he's complained about. I wrote it down. It's not. Oh, there we go. Plantar fasciitis. It's a issue, pain in the heel, and it went from him really struggling to do anything, including throw. I think he did a headlock takedown that he sort of got away with, some weak offense, and it went from an old man wrestling to it honestly turned into Weekend at Bernie's towards the end.
That was so horrible. I can't believe you said that.
But he really was.
I'm gonna adopt it now. Weekend at Bernie's.
But he was. They were scraping him off the canvas just to do anything. It's like when he tagged out, he wasn't moving practically.
Which is another statement of mine, a vanity project. I think he was so worried that he was going to go out there and look bad. It blew him up emotionally because that's why he was out of breath. That's why he blew up, and you could see him breathing. That's why a lot of people thought he was going to die, because he was in the middle of a sale job, breathing so hard, it didn't look like he could move. And that's where your heels come in. You know, that's where Jeff Jarrett came in, could cover for that a little bit. You're not going to cover for it 100%, but I think he was blown up with nerves. I think nerves is probably the best way to describe it, other than emotional. And he wanted to be remembered as this is his final match, or he could pretend his final match as somebody comes up with some more money. And I actually felt sorry for him. I really did. If somebody said, Dutch, will you have another match? And I would say, not no, but hell no. But till they said, well, what about 50 grand? Oh, well, all of a sudden, I feel more up to it. And that's what I think is going to happen to Rick. Because a vanity project, but if he has another one offered, will he take it? What do you say? He will?
Probably. I mean, do you know what? I actually genuinely think if he does another one, somehow it'll end up being better than this one. But I'll make a couple more notes and then I will move, and then I'll throw it back to you, or we can move on. But he apparently mouthed to Andrade or whoever that he blacked out at one point. He doesn't remember half the match because he just blacked out and passed out. And two, he couldn't even get the knucks on his hand. That was the finish of these brass knuckles. He couldn't even get them on his hand briefly because he couldn't put them on his hands because they were trembling so much. But then afterwards he gets up eventually, and then later that night he goes out and parties with Kid Rock. So apparently he's okay, and I'm glad he's okay.
Well, I guess he's okay partying because he's practiced for that. But he shouldn't even be doing that because the doctor told him, don't drink, don't do this, don't do that, and he's out doing it. So one thought I had about Flair was that if he had actually died in the ring, I don't think he would have been disappointed. I mean, of course, you know, you die and you'd never have a chance to know that. But it's going away, final retirement match, and then he dies. I think that's the way he wants to go. He wants to go away in what he loved the most, and that was pro wrestling. Me, I'm not that dedicated, to tell you the truth. And for years and years and years, he was the measuring stick about how guys were. But if you watch Flair, he does the same moves over and over and over and over again. You could almost predict what he's going to do because he hasn't changed that routine in 20 years. But what Flair was good at doing in his younger days, it was just making people, you know, want to see him get his butt kicked, which is an art, and he had that art down. And he was good. He drew a lot of money. So
We shall move on then. Actually, I wanted to ask you about Jeff Jarrett because he was heavily praised for the match because he helped pace it very slowly and he's an old hand, a real pro, especially of the Memphis style of getting the most out of the least in the sense of, stalling, spreading out the time and everything. Do you think Jeff Jarrett gets enough praise for being a very smart and very good wrestler?
No, nowhere close to it. Jeff Jarrett was broken in. He cut his teeth on the Memphis style of wrestling. And the Memphis style of wrestling drew tons of money back then, but it relied more on story than the quality of the match. The match could be so-so, but if it fit the story at the finish, we could carry on. And that's how he was brought in. That's why he could see. And that's why he's called a ring general. I call him a ring general because he could see Rick was in trouble. Well, let me go in here and let me help him. And Jay Lethal could see it too. So, of course, Jeff relayed his concerns to Jay. And they helped Rick as much as they could get through it, but yet still, for them helping him, still couldn't cover it up. Because if you just look at it now as a whole, he did too much. He tried to go in there too soon. He just needed to do his chops, do his strut, and get the heat on the other guy, make the comeback to him, bam, 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 let's go. Very simple. You know how long it would take to work out that finish in the dressing room? About 5 minutes, 3 minutes. That's all they got to do. Because nothing was complex. And I don't know who made the decision to keep Rick in the ring so much, unless it was his. And I think it was Rick's, because I don't think Jeff would make that mistake of calling that, because he knew what it would be like. But if he wants to do it, let's make the most of it. That's why I call him a ring general. If you can't change it, make it work, or try to make it work. And that's what Jeff did. No, he does not get the benefit of the doubt, how good a job he did. He looked great in the match. And everybody else looked great except for Rick, except for who it was for. And my hat's off to Jeff. I've known that kid since he was like 13, 14 years old. You know how I first met him?
He wasn't driving a car with Jamie Dundee, was he, by any chance?
Oh, no, he wasn't doing that. He was selling programs for his grandmother, Teeny, which is Jerry Jarrett's mother. She used to run like different shows. And he would be around the matches, watching the matches. And none of us had any idea that he wanted to be a wrestler. And he went to college and played basketball. And then he didn't want to go to college anymore. And he finally told his dad, I'm going to start wrestling. And they broke him in. But he broke in with a lot of knowledge about the business before he ever stepped into the ring. So, and I remember his first match. He was against a guy named Tony Falk in Memphis. And I didn't see the match. I'm just watching the match, listening to the match in the dressing room. I heard, wow, people responding like a son of a bitch. And I went, what the hell are they doing? And I said, hell, who's in the ring? Ric Flair? but it was Jeff Jarrett in his first match with Tony Falk, because Tony Falk at the time had never won a match. And he said, but there is one guy I can beat. I can beat Jeff Jarrett. And he said, he's not even a wrestler. Well, he comes from a wrestling family, so he knows what he's doing. I'll beat him. So they booked it. It was a great match. Just by following a simple storyline.
We will move on to SummerSlam. You've watched some of it, and you enjoyed the show.
Oh, I did enjoy the show. One reason I enjoyed the show was a change had just been made. Vince had just resigned, and Triple H had taken over. But I first heard that Bruce Pritchard took over. That's what I heard first. Mm-hmm. Did you hear that?
Yeah, he was probably installed creatively for about a week, and then Triple H was announced as the new head of creative and basically the head of WWE practically.
And then Triple H moved in, which I thought was the best move they could have made. the best because he had a measure of success with NXT, working with inexperienced people, but yet he had people talking about it. So I think that Triple H is the best answer at this time. And I do like what he's been saying to talent and to anybody within the company. He said, hey, if you got an idea, pitch it. See, Vince said that one time, and then he became hard to see because I think everybody ran to him at the same time. And he said, I got to cut this off because everybody's got an idea, except for the ones that couldn't get in, like me. But my idea was good, by the way. I just want to tell you that. But he'll listen, and he understands the origins or the origin of wrestling, where it comes from, and he's a good maestro for the band.
With let's shelve SummerSlam for a second then. When you were in the WWE the second time, so the Zeb Colter run, what did Triple H do exactly in the back? Was he just a jack of all trades, or what would you go to him for?
When I was there in my Uncle Zeb days, or
no, the Zeb Colter. Zeb Colter WWE.
Oh, he was up the chain. He was the one who actually hired me. I mean, I went in there and that day I went down at 3:30, met Triple H at 4:30, did an interview for Vince at 5:30. Triple H hired me at 6:30. I've said this before. And then I was live on Raw that night at 7:30 Central Time. So I was 8:30 Eastern Time. But yeah, he was pretty high up the chain. So if you had a problem, or if I had a problem, I would go to him. Of course, none of my problems were unfixable. It was just maybe a little nudge here, a little nudge there. So nothing drastic or anything. But he had a lot of duties, and I don't know what he was then. I don't even know he wasn't working. I don't know what his title was then, but he was up the chain.
SummerSlam then, you were quite happy that Becky Lynch, well, not that she landed badly on her shoulder, sorry, that was the first thing I read then. You were happy that she became a babyface after a year of really trying to force the fans to hate her.
Well, that's a Triple H move right there. He looked at it and he said, hey, the fans, I mean, anybody could see it. It's putting action to it. It's a problem. She was going out there and she was trying to be a bad girl, but the people loved her. When she went away, they loved her, so they brought her back. And I said, well, let's just turn her. That's an old Vince trick. He did it over and over and over and over. But the people didn't accept her after a year. So, hey, when are you finally going to look at your product and read the room? The room doesn't want her. So let's change her. So even though she had a match with Bianca, correct? She lost the match?
Yep, she lost the match.
She lost the match, which now goes back to their year ago, SummerSlam. Or where did she lose the match? Where did Bianca lose the match to Becky? A year ago?
Yeah, it was about a year ago, yeah.
26 seconds. Well, they put Bianca over, which was great. And then she was down. She was probably hurt for real. And then there's other three girls showed up. They made their introduction, made their presence known. And then Becky gets up. Now she's going to go with Bianca to fight these three. Well, you got 5 people over there at one time. You got Bianca over. Now Becky got beat, so let's take her out. She's out of it. Now 3 more girls go in. Now you got 4 standing there, 3 against 1. And then Becky, the girl who got beat, stands up, joins Bianca. Now she's over. They introduced 5 different characters in the same match. And now we're all wondering, what are we going to do with this? So at least our interest is there. Now we'll see, and I've always said this about booking. It's not the first thing you do. It's the second thing. Now, how are they going to follow this? Because they could follow this and kill this one, but they won't, not with Triple H there. He'll follow the story and he'll try to get those heels over. And Becky's already over, except she's hurt now. But I really, 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 really like that because that's an old school finish that we've done for years. And WWE, by hiring people or writers that don't understand the wrestling business, they're not that indoctrinated in it. They don't see it. So by hiring wrestlers and writers who don't understand the wrestling business, I think it was the worst thing they've done. Because I would have writers come to me in the back WWE, and I would say something, and they just look at me like, "What are you talking about?" I went, "Well, they don't know what I'm talking about." So I couldn't give them an angle to give to Vince because they didn't understand the angle that I gave to them. See, these angles are layered. I mean, I'm throwing it all in here at one time, but they could not go to Vince and give the same angle because if Vince questioned them about it, they didn't understand it. So, but now and I also think this. I think the creative in WWE will change. I think they got enough writers. I mean, how much does it help? Most wrestlers could write a promo. I mean, you don't have to go to school for them to be a creative writer. I mean, wrestlers can do that. But I think you're going to see a lot more wrestling-oriented people on creative because that's who Triple H identifies with. Because he'll call them around and they'll start talking, and they're all talking the same language. The writers didn't talk the same language. The wrestlers will, and they'll understand crowd. They understand heat. They understand who gets over, who don't get over. I mean, that's all ingrained in them. So we're going to see a lot more creative people with wrestling backgrounds on creative in WWE.
What other matches did you watch at SummerSlam, and any that you want to particularly bring up?
I think it was brilliant with the Brock Lesnar and the Roman Reigns because that's different. That's what made WWE in the beginning. Do different stuff. And I don't know whose idea it was to bring that front end loader out there, but we've seen him do this one other time. We saw him do it on SmackDown. You know, he run the front end loader into the SUV. So him coming down like that wasn't unexpected, but it was unexpected. But it fit Brock. I mean, he lifted that ring up, the place erupted because, and especially in Nashville, it's a southern town. They see that stuff all the time, so they like that. I didn't like the Usos going over on the
Street Profits, is it?
The Street Profits. I didn't like I didn't much like that because I'm kind of sick of that, and I think that could have used a lot of creative help. Nothing other than switching the belts. See, there's still a big line that we can do between Roman and the Usos, and they're holding off on it. And I'm happy about that because that gives them somewhere to go. And the Profits, they held off on that because that gives them somewhere to go with those two guys. So there's a lot of places to move now after this SummerSlam. That's why I'm happy with it because at least they have somewhere to go with it. The Becky Lynch and the Bianca thing has a lot of legs to it. 3 new people, they have a lot of legs to it. What's the kid's name who started Paul? What's his name in the first match with Miz?
Logan Paul.
Logan Paul. What's his brother's name?
Jake Paul.
Okay. Folks, listen, I can't remember names because I've been hitting the head a couple 100,000 times. I know who I'm talking about. I just can't recall the name. But they had a great match. A great match. The Theory, who do you work with?
Bobby Lashley.
Yeah. How was that? I didn't see that match. How was that?
You're asking the wrong person there. I don't know. I haven't seen it.
But I heard he was pretty good. Mm-hmm. But I think Theory now is, I hope they stay with him because I think he is a future star. But I don't know how strong they're going to be with him. I don't know what Vince liked him. He was Vince's guy. So was Kurt Angle. So was Undertaker. So was Batista. They were all handpicked by Vince. Theory was handpicked by Vince, but now the creative changed. So we'll see how much he's over with the new creative, and that should start. That'll probably start soon. And we'll see what they're going to do with him.
With one other thing I wanted to bring up, and Ronda Rousey loses to Liv Morgan, then she's suspended the next day for attacking Liv afterwards. And I'm interested in your perspective, as I always am. Ronda Rousey, how do you keep her special after so long? Or is she not as special as when she first debuted? Because Brock still is super special. You only see him a few times a year. Ronda is starting to feel a bit more just like one of the roster, almost like Ken Shamrock back in the day.
Well, that's one of the things called overexposure. See, Ronda Rousey, if she's the baddest woman on the planet, see, creative told her to go to the ring smiling. That is not her character. She should be mad at the people and just sullen. And she wants to be, you see her and you said, you got to dislike her from the moment she comes out if she's a heel. But if she's smiling and slapping little kids' hands, well, she's not too bad. And then she gets in the ring, then she goes she changes. She advances to the mean Ronda. Well, you need to show that character from entrance back to the entrance, because if you don't, you're confusing the fan. Now, I think if they put her out like that, if she was just sullen and just mean looking and unfriendly from the time she walks through that gate, that doorway, and keep her that way till she gets to the ring, that would help a lot. Because you make decisions like this, and every second you see her walking, your brain is clicking, whether you like her or not. But if you see her, there's nothing to like, well, that ingrains it in your head. Well, this woman's just no good biatch. And that's what you want people thinking. But I don't know. I think she needs to be a heel along the lines of, well, I can't even think right now. See, if you try to compare people, say Ronda Rousey versus Kurt Angle. Well, Kurt Angle was a great talker. He'd make you mad just listening to him, because he's the type you want to like, but you just can't like him because of his mouth. Ronda Rousey, she looks like a very unpleasant woman just looking at her. You don't think she'd be friendly, and she's probably not. But to force that on her, and you could tell when she's trying to do interviews, when she was trying to get people to like her, it wasn't her at all. And you could tell, fans can tell that. So she's drawing I've always called it connection, how you connect with the fans. And if you connect with them in a positive way, they're going to support you. If you could contact them with a negative way, they'll support you if they think you're going to get your butt beat.
I'll do a comparison for you. Ronda Rousey, I'll compare with Ronda Rousey. I know you're not a big UFC fan. I've seen every single pay-per-view, I think pretty much ever. And Ronda Rousey in the UFC, she came out, she had that mean mug the entire way down. She stomped her feet. The crowd hated her. Keep in mind that no one ever cheered her, Ronda Rousey, after maybe a match or two. She would dominate, she would kill people in that octagon. And then she would get on the microphone, she would be cocky, people would boo her more, and guess what happened? Her pay-per-view, as a pay-per-view draw, she was maybe third of all time, behind Conor and Brock Lesnar, maybe, somewhere around that. She was maybe even joint second. And when she was interviewed outside of the octagon, just in whatever setting it may be, she was unpleasant there as well. You could just tell she was just a cocky, self-important, big head, but she was great and she knew it. And do you know what? People secretly admire somebody who's great and they know it.
Well, that made my point. She was her character, or whatever she wanted to extend. She was that way 24 hours a day, even on oral interviews, right? When she was just giving an interview, she was still a smart ass.
Yep.
And she has to be that way. I mean, you could tell she was having trouble trying to get people to like her because she didn't want them to like her because she doesn't like them. I don't think she likes people. I really don't. She might like her little kid or little boy or little girl, whatever she's got, and her family, just her immediate people. But people in general, she don't give a crap. And I think when you send her down there and she's smiling and slapping hands, she's a total 100% different than her UFC days. And if the people, I don't know why WWE didn't see that. I don't see why Vince didn't see that. But now Vince is gone, and that may be one of the reasons he's gone. And people have said that he is out of touch. I don't know if he's out of touch or this is the way he just used to do it. But common sense will tell you that if people don't like him coming down the ramp, they're not going to like him in the ring. So kind of book that same demeanor, that same character all the way through. This is one guy I said he was his character 24 hours a day. Macho Man. Randy Savage was the Macho Man 24 hours a day from the time he woke up all through the day, no matter what he was doing, till he went back to sleep. He was the Macho Man. So he started out as Randy Poffo. Then he went to Randy Macho Man Poffo. Then I think he just went to He morphed into Macho Man, and he never morphed back. But see, when you see Randy Savage, if you met him, you don't want to say, "Hello, how you doing, Randy Savage?" You don't want to see that. You want to go, "Yeah, man." That's what you want to see, because now he is what he is, and you can't deny that. Heels, back in the territory days, I'm going back years and years and years. If you were a heel in Memphis, you better be a heel on the street. Because if the office heard that you signed an autograph or people were liking you, or you went in and, you had them slapping you on the back, they didn't like that. Because you signed on to be the character 24 hours a day. So now when I was a heel, I just didn't talk to people. I just walked by them, and I never confronted them. I never hollered at them. I just withdrawn. So they couldn't really draw a bead on me, whether I was likable or not. But still, even that, I had them thinking, is he really the biggest asshole that we've seen as he is on TV? Because they wonder that. I wonder he's that way off camera. So if you don't give them a reason to disbelieve you, hence my term, people will believe until you give them a reason to disbelieve. But Ronda Rousey, she's much too trying to be friendly for her own good. Now I hope this time off, she gets good and pissed off and mad and comes back as the old Ronda. Now I think they'll draw some money that way.
Yeah, I hope so too. We will move on to a couple more things, then we will shut down this podcast. And something you've alluded to in a previous show of ours, in fact, but I want to get to is Kevin Dunn. And after Vince McMahon wished himself the best in his future endeavours, Kevin Dunn, you speculated, and a lot of people have speculated, is going to be next on the chopping block. And I suppose, first off, what exactly is Kevin Dunn's roles in WWE? I know he's like a director, producer, but what specifically is he in charge of?
Well, on the live taping, he's the producer and director. So he sits in the truck, in the production truck, with the headphones on, and he's got all kind of buttons that he can talk to anybody on the floor. He can talk to the camera guy at position one, or camera guy on 2 or 3, or he can talk to the sound engineer who plays the music. He can talk to the announcer. He can talk to everybody. So he is directing everything you see on the floor, lighting. He is producing all that and directing all that. That's when all the shoots, the shots that nobody likes, that'll give you a headache. He invented that, and nobody told him to get away from it. And I know why he invented it, because if a punch doesn't look good, if it's moving, you can't tell. I understand why he did it. But in the years that he was Vince's right-hand man, I think he rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And I think one guy that he rubbed the wrong way was Triple H. And I think he also rubbed Bruce Pritchard the wrong way. I don't know how much power Bruce has now, but I think in rubbing Triple H the wrong way is the same as rubbing Stephanie the wrong way. So because he could overrule them, and they didn't like that. So it's like an old wound, an old scar that's reminding you, well, this guy didn't want to do this, and this guy didn't want to do, and you couldn't tell him nothing. Because I've heard that Kevin Dunn would sit in, and I can believe this, in creative meetings and just trash everything they've done. That's not, he was Vince's guy in the creative meeting. So that's where a lot of negative comments went back to Vince through Kevin, and why a lot of stuff was turned down is because of him. Now Triple H, I don't even know if Kevin Dunn will be even invited to creative meetings anymore. But what I think will happen, Triple H going to be very political here, and he's going to play the sides against the middle, and they're going to come to Kevin. And I think first they'll try to make it a little bit uncomfortable for him and try to show everybody that he doesn't have the power he used to have. And that's a personal feeling. That's what I'm thinking. But I think what will happen, Kevin, he won't be released, because that would be almost the indignity of a lifetime for him, to be released from a company that he thinks in his mind, and maybe rightfully so, that he helped build. What I think he'll do, he'll just pick a date, and he'll say, well, like my old friend Vince McMahon, time to move on. He said, I love everybody, and hope you continue with your success, and I'm retiring. I think, and he'll retire. Is what I think. Now the other ones will be, he has some more bones to pick with anybody else. I think they'll just be released. But I think Kevin will retire. I think he's got enough money anyway. He's not depending on his next check to get by. He's probably a multi-millionaire. So, and he'll just may quit and go on a cruise. That's what I'd do.
You won't get this joke, but sorry, I changed the camera about 48 times there, so that's for Kevin Dunn in tribute of his frenetic camera style and
I got
zooming
it.
in. Do you know there's a story actually? Sorry, Dutch. I want to ask you. Is apparently the Kevin Dunn's job supposedly was secured for life because his father rescued some tapes from a burning car. What's the story with that? Have you ever even heard of it?
I've heard that, but I never heard it before. I mean, I read it, and I read that recently. Where did he rescue these tapes?
I don't know. I think it was like in the, you'd say trunk, the boot of a car that must have gone on fire, and there was maybe some like master tapes in there that he. I don't know. I don't know any context of the story other than that.
But it wasn't Kevin Dunn. It was Kevin Dunn's father.
Ah, right.
I think that was what it was. But hey, if it was worth that to him, and I think Kevin was enough of a political behind the scenes worker, and he was just a yes man to Vince. And what else could anybody be to Vince? Because he had total control. Nobody could tell him anything. You could suggest things to him, which is why I always say you got to, when you pitched an angle to WWE Creative, you had to make them think it was their idea. So if it was their idea, oh, well, we got this great idea. They're not going to walk in and say, hey, Vince, Dutch has this fucking idea that I think you'd love. No, it's going to be their idea, but you don't care as long as your idea gets through. But I don't know about the burning car stuff, but I think if that was the reason, at least he followed through on his promise. Mm-hmm. How old is Kevin Dunn?
Oh, I don't know. I know he was working for the company in the 80s. I don't know how old he is. He must be 60 or so, maybe.
He got to be about 65, probably. Mm-hmm.
Time to
are
retire.
older. It is.
I will give you a couple more questions and we will shut this podcast down. And I want to get to Bryan Danielson. He has finally been cleared for action and immediately was booked to lose to Daniel Garcia on the 27th July Dynamite. I bring this up because I said Bryan Danielson, whichever one. Bryan really, really likes to use the parlance, put young guys over and make them look good. But isn't he just too big of a star to lose to anybody? I mean, it sort of just makes him look bad rather than the other person looking good at some point, surely.
Oh, I don't think so. I think he's that good of a talent inside the ring. And he wouldn't have put this kid over if this kid is not good. That's like Daniel, what are we calling him now? Daniel Bryan?
Yes, Bryan Danielson. I mean, I'm so conditioned to say Daniel Bryan, I can't get used to the other way.
So what is his name in AEW?
It's his real name, and in AEW is Bryan Danielson.
Okay. I think he's over enough to make this kid, and he wants to make this kid look like he belongs. And if there's some doubt over whether he belongs or not, they had a great match, I heard. And I think they'll just come back and put them back together, and then Danielson will beat him. But I think Bryan has more of a head on his shoulders because certain guys don't lose, but he can, and that's fine. I think it's fine for AEW because nobody expected that. Even Bryan Danielson didn't expect it. So I think it makes the other kid more than it hurts Daniel Bryan.
With see, you're saying Daniel Bryan now. I nearly said Daniel Bryan as well. Bryan Danielson, he is probably, I mean, along with CM Punk, the most popular person in the company. And I suppose that's really why I said he really shouldn't be losing to just anybody. It should be kept to special occasions. But I believe he's probably about there or about the most popular person in the company, and maybe should even be the face of the company.
Mm-hmm. And what's the question? Should he be the face?
No, it's probably not that. It's that maybe he shouldn't be losing to just anybody. It should be kept to very select occasions.
I think in this situation, it doesn't hurt because it's fixable. We can fix this. I mean, and Bryan Danielson, I say his name right?
Mm-hmm.
Bryan Danielson, he has an excuse that's believable. I underestimated him. And people will buy that. I underestimated him, and I'm going to see how good he is, and they can fix that. See, I don't think AEW has the star that they want to make their marquee star yet. CM Punk is probably the closest to it, but he's hurt right now, correct?
CM Punk is, yeah.
Well, I'll say one thing for AEW. I actually know more guys over there, or I think of them a little bit differently because, Danhausen, a great gimmick. I love the gimmick. And that Orange Cassidy, they're comic relief, but I like that stuff. And who's Wardlow? They beat him with Orange Cassidy, I think, didn't they?
I think Wardlow won.
Wardlow beat him, yeah.
But he took a good beating first.
Yeah. But I think they have actually more talent to get to that main level than I think WWE does right now. Now, maybe not when Triple H really gets his teeth into it. Now they'll know where to go. But I'm looking forward to Triple H doing his magic in WWE. And they had one match in AEW that was, I'll think of it in a minute, but it was like a 3 or 4 person set where everybody came out a winner. And that's what you look for. You look for things that doesn't hurt one guy, even if he gets beat. And I'll bring up, Becky Lynch, she got beat. But nobody remembers that when the match is over. What they remember is now Becky and Bianca are on the same side. That's where they wanted them to be for the last year. Took them a year to get, but now Becky's hurt. So, and that'll wear off, but they'll have to come back about 4 weeks before she's ready, get her ready again. And then I think they're ready to ride.
We will go to this one. Tully Blanchard is believed to be gone from AEW, although a reason has not been given. Any stories about Tully to mention? We mentioned Tessa a couple of weeks ago, or last week, in fact. But Tully Blanchard, any memories of working with?
Well, I worked with him not that much when I was in Mid-Atlantic years and years ago. But I remember we were in Raleigh, North Carolina one night, and Tully told me this later. It was Tully and Lex Luger versus me and Bobby Jaggers, and we were like the Kansas Jayhawks. For whatever reason, I don't know. I'm from Texas. I don't know how, and he's from Kansas. So I don't know how we got the name, the Texas Jayhawks. But I remember Tully telling me later, he said, you know what Lex told me in the dressing room? I said, what? He said, he didn't think he could have a match with you guys. I went, what? And he said, well, that's what I said. He said, you can't have a match with those two guys. Well, and Lex was another one that couldn't tell you how he got over. But we went to the ring, and Tully says, he just told him in the dressing room, just watch me, Lex, and learn. We went out and burnt the house down with Tully, and Lex just got in on the finish. Then and the match was good. People were up, they were cheering, a lot of reaction from them. And I remember he said, I just looked at him on the way back, and he said, see, that's how you do it, Lex. But Lex still didn't get it. And I knew that, and Tully knew that. Tully was a pretty good guy. So, and he got into religion later on. And that's a subject we should talk about one day. A lot of wrestlers ended up being in the religious business, having.
I think we have. I think we've mentioned it. We've mentioned it before.
Well, a lot of them did. But see, Tully was that. He's still in that. He does a prison ministry, which is one reason they tried to say that he wasn't at AEW, last week or 2 weeks ago. He had a prison ministry meeting. You know, if I had a prison ministry meeting, I think I'd make AEW, because those prison guys aren't going anywhere. You could very easily postpone that to next week or another night in the week. So, but if he does a prison ministry, you know, God bless him. I'm glad he's doing that. Another guy that was a big evangelical was Teddy DiBiase. Mm-hmm. And knowing some of the crap he's done, he needed to find God. He needed forgiveness. Another one was Jake the Snake. Have you ever seen, and I'm going to tell everybody this, it's a documentary called Marjo.
No. You've brought this up to me before, though. It's something in the 70s, isn't it? The evangelical, yep. Yeah.
Well, if nobody's ever seen it, what Marjo did in the evangelical business was the same as lifting the lid on the wrestling business. What Marjo did was smarten everybody up that wanted to be smartened up. But like somebody exposing how wrestling works, he exposed how the religious revivals worked. and he was right on with it. But we've often heard that these preachers, what I've heard since I was a kid, well, they're a bunch of drunks. They go out after the revival, they go out, get drunk, they get with women, they gamble, they do all these things, and then they're not meaning what they say. And most people said, oh, no, that can't be true. That can't be true of Brother Ray. That can't be true of Brother Bill. But it was true. But we've often heard that, like you've heard wrestling. Oh, it's fake. No, it's not. No, it's not. But turns out that there's a lot of similarities between the evangelical business and the wrestling business. You have music, you have a crowd, you have a speaker, you have a superstar, I mean, you can't beat God or Jesus. You have a you have a superstar, and then they want you to donate money. So I don't know what else needs to be explained.
And they don't heal everybody every week, so you got to keep coming back.
I mean, do you remember this? The old time revival TV shows.
That was never a thing over here. I know what you mean though, but that
they
was
on
never
YouTube.
A thing here.
They on YouTube. Because I remember they had a bunch of evangelists when I was a kid. Of course, they'd get in line and the preacher would come up, heal, and they'd go down. Oh my God. It was, and I was watching, like, that's about 7 years old. I was going, what the hell? God, I said, I don't know if I want this God guy. He wants to punch me, knock me out. It was great viewing at the time. You can still catch it on YouTube. So if anybody wants to see how they work, just tune it in.
I've got a list here of 15 ordained ministers who used to be wrestlers or currently were. And I think these are people who can just marry you, but there's obviously going to be some preachers in as well. So these are people who are ordained to marry you. Mark Mero, the Honky Tonk Man, The Rock, Connor from The Ascension, apparently, Johnny Angel I've never heard of, Bobby Fulton, Slick, which he did go on to be a preacher, Nature Boy Buddy Landell, a man close to God, I believe.
Oh my, Buddy Landell.
Mm-hmm.
I loved him to death. And Buddy was religious at times, could quote the Bible, could actually preach you a sermon on the way to a town. Very fun to be around when he wasn't, all messed up. And he knew he had demons. And he would tell you that I got demons. And he would pray to God. And he was a sinner. He would tell you that. But he'd give me confusing signals. And like all those other guys gave me confusing signals too. So I'm not going to say about all them, but there was a few people in there I don't think that believed like they should have believed to be in that business.
One person I should bring up as well is Nikita Koloff that I forgot. He's turned into a preacher for quite a number of years as well.
Well, with Nikita, I don't know. I think he's pretty well straight up with it because he doesn't drink. He doesn't run around. I mean, as far as I know, he's pretty straight to his word. Not all of them.
The only other one mentioned here is Ivan Koloff, Ted DiBiase, Tully Blanchard, Ranger Ross. Now that's a name from WCW he was there for about 5 minutes.
Yeah, Ranger Ross robbed 2 banks.
Never.
Yeah, he robbed 2 banks.
Oh, well, I've got to write that down.
You don't know? Look him up. He was in Atlanta. He robbed 2 banks. And let me give you another one. Who is the guy he was managing Bobby Lashley?
MVP. Didn't he rob the Riverboat Casino or a cruise ship or something?
A riverboat casino, he robbed it. Where are you going to go in a riverboat casino? I mean, I remember I booked him in Puerto Rico. I mean, I didn't, but Luke booked him in. And he went out there and he was trying to learn the wrestling business. I got that. But he went out there one night and he just wrestled and wrestled and wrestled. He didn't do one thing that the people should dislike him on. I called him back there and I says, what are you doing? He said, I'm wrestling. I said, well, I know that, but we don't really do that a lot here. We need the people to dislike you and boo you so I can actually do something with you. I said, as your match, if you just study it from a straight technical aspect, it was good, but from a creative aspect, it sucked. So cut out the wrestling and start doing some of this other bull crap that I know you hate, but you have to do it.
Was he always good at promos, MVP?
He was okay. He was pretty good, according to what you give him to talk about. But he could talk in the dressing room. He was okay. But then again, see, it didn't matter if he was good at promos in Puerto Rico because they spoke Spanish. So it would work there.
Did you cover up his tattoos like WWE did afterwards? Because they were like legit prison tattoos, weren't they? Like all up his torso, I think.
They were? I didn't even know it. He could have killed me. No, I didn't cover up anything. Hey, Puerto Rico, they don't care. Unless they knew what they were. So WWE covered them up.
Yeah, you almost wore like a, like a diver's suit almost, just like with shorts. Yeah,
I didn't even know that. But yeah, he'd been in. I guess he was in prison from that riverboat robbery, and I never heard the details on that. But he's out, and I guess he's doing good. So,
well, if
peace to him.
I'll see if I can come up with something incredibly quickly. If not, I will just shut the podcast down. Personal life. Here we go. Sorry, Wikipedia. Acquired numerous tattoos through his life, including Malcolm X on the upper left. Oh, come on. Where it's the most interesting thing about him, and it doesn't say it on his Wikipedia, for crikey's sake. Sorry, that'll have to be for another show. But for now, with that sort of a terrible sort of outro to the podcast, I will shut everything down. We've got books on Amazon. If you want to know what they are, go to the beginning of the show. Please give us 5 stars on iTunes if you're that way inclined. And is your website out, Dutch, yet?
Not quite. Should be out next week. I'm still having a little trouble with the engineer of it.
What's going to be on there that we could flog people, sell to people?
Well, I'm going to have I've told you about my University of Dutch diplomas. That will be on there. I'm coming out with some T-shirts soon. And my 2 books are on there, how to get them personally signed. I mean, you can get it off Amazon. But they're not signed. So if you want them signed to you or personally signed, just send me an email at dirtydutchmantell@gmail. Mantell was 2 L's, and I'll get back to you. Mm-hmm. So sometimes I sit here and I'll get, 3 or 4 orders just through email and just sign it to this guy and send it to this address. But what I hate is when I don't hate it, but is when I get somewhere from England or Europe, because that shipping is atrocious.
It's an arm and a leg both ways.
Oh my God. I mean, if you're trying to send something to England, it's like 2 or 3 or 4 times maybe what you'd pay for in the state. But of course, now I know you're changing postal systems, and I don't know how that reimbursement works back and forth. But to send something international is too much. I sent something somewhere, forgot where I sent it, but it was more than what the order was. The order was like $40 or $50. To ship it was $60. I said, damn. Anyway, that's not my area of expertise, so I'll just have to go with what they say.
No, I bought a T-shirt once. It was $25, and the shipping was $20. I was like, that's depressing.
That's too much. So anyway, if anybody wants to get hold of me, dirtydutchmantell@gmail. And the email address, when it goes up, dirtydutchmantell, 2 L's.com. That'll be up. So start checking it out, put it on your list, and see if I can get some people reading that thing.
Yeah, put it on your speed dial, or whatever the equivalent of a speed dial is on your browser, but do that for now. And all that is left to say is thank you very much for listening or watching, however you consume this media, and thank you, Dutch, for entertaining us once again.